Alright, then the Chasa and the J Samalia Dambo and the Jik Tishitili Shuyata and the answer Jik or the Chishigi Dustine Jik Jones did some Dusniam Leva Delia and negotiations Jesuita use. Do?
Good morning to everyone. Firstly, I wish to acknowledge the traditional owners of Gyatso Wurrung country on which this retreat is being held, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. And then to all of you specifically, both here and at home, welcome, Tashi Dele, and I rejoice in your decision to use your free time over this long weekend to come together so that we can look at this text and give rise to its meaning within our hearts.
Alright, that during on the Chikima Chushi di Karasene and the Yawan, that's it. Yogan Gyatso, Gendün to Sonshi, because I guess a Sonshi Bigida, the Nigi, and the Jika, Ma Gansuki, and Nyamlin Ganis Chehore, Sibetishin Batma Sonshi, Dikor Mashuare.
This brief text by the second Dalai Lama, Gendün Gyatso, is what we're going to look at. So we'll start by seeing how we can train our own mind in what he has presented here.
Nyamlin Jigi said, Dondala, Tanganot Shazan, Digi di Kuore, Dunga di Kuku, Maranzo, Koya di Digi, Moya di Dunga di Ret, Dunga Ganga di Moya, Tangat Shazan, Jiguro, Minare, Dundro, and Asimja, Suine, Hada, Mida, Dundro, Kandeshine, Matchasalia, Goyachi, the Moya Chikini or Wada, the Goyachi, the Garson, and the Digi, Moya di Ganga di Ret, Dunga, the Ganga Setrua.
To start out, let's look at what is the meaning of Buddhist practice or Dharma practice. Well, the first point to recognize is that all of us, we want to abide in happiness. What we long for is for our mind to always be at peace, to always be experiencing happiness. We never want to experience even a moment of pain or any form of problem or difficulty at all. And this is not unique to myself or to everyone here, but is the case for all human beings, all animals, all unseen beings. Every being wants to live a life completely freed of problems and difficulties, a life freed of suffering, a life of lasting happiness. So we can divide every experience into those which we want and those which we don't want. Or to express it as I just have, we can divide every experience into those of happiness, which is what we want, and suffering, which is what we don't want.
Ganga Yoya de Ganes Yungore, Digi Yoya de Ganes Yungore, Sebegeda, and to do in the Shimjuk de Kabla, Ganga Yoya di Chi Yungubi Tone, and an Azuya Ganga Chik Chigore. And then Nang Samlo Tanda Tone, Ganga Chikanga Niti, Ganga Yonta di Dinima de Yomara, Chingubi Tone, and the Ganga Yonta Chita, and Nang Samlo Tanda Tone, Ganga Yonta, Ganga Yoya de Dinima de Yomara. That's not to Digi Dubia there. And got Chingubi Tone, Tungi Tone out to Digi Tubia, now some lot on the Digi Tutashi, Digi Tuta de Tablam Nima de Yomara, Ganga Yonda, Yonta Nite, Dinima de Yomara, Shimju Chebenda.
What is unwanted is all forms of problems, suffering, and difficulties, whether slight or severe. And what is wanted is all forms of happiness. Recognizing this, then, we will come to the question will arise, so what are the causes of our unwanted suffering and what are the causes of our wanted happiness? Because to the extent we can recognize the causes, we'll seek out how to cultivate them, cultivate the causes for happiness and eradicate or avoid the causes that would otherwise lead to suffering. So in general, we can point to two different sources for our suffering and our problems and our pain and our difficulty come either from the outer world or from the inner mental world. And the same two sources apply for happiness, either from our inner mental world or everything that is external other than our inner world. And that is what we refer to as our outer world. So the sources of both happiness and suffering are either our inner world, our way of thinking, or everything apart from that.
탑람 치 용어비 토네 아주 디기 주비아지다 낭 삼로다 도네 디기 주비아레 안 강아세에 대한 치 튕긴이 토네 강아세에지다 낭 삼로다 토네 강아세다 강아세에 대한 디기 주비아데 탑람 디니라레.
Then recognize that those are the two sources from which happiness and suffering arise. Then the next step is to recognize that in order then to eliminate the possibility of experiencing suffering, we need to eradicate or not cultivate anew causes for suffering and cultivate anew causes for happiness. So therefore we try to eradicate the sources of suffering, whether in the outer world and the inner world, and we try to cultivate the sources of happiness, both in the outer world as well as in the inner world.
인자 당한 저기 최냠는 지간조에나 가르치듯이 미유 가르라네 강아세야다 디기 주의에게 쳐도 아니 미유디 강아세야다 디기 주의에도 날려 주시고래 나가서 디멘베게 지게 총바다 레가레간 조에네 미유 가래 강아세야다 디기 주의에도 날려 레가리고래 근데 지금 저기 편춘 막수 yapje kanga ji phanchu mawro kya da ndu shebe ne desu ine kanga se da digi du ye don dal mi di sine ji ji go ba di na shen dang an zhe ge gu mao gu ya re jia zhen xi gan re an ji ge chang dun ge re an ji ge zimen me za han ge desu ine gar shi yosna kanga se da digi du ye don dal ji mi yu cha sa da chue je ge na da le ge na da 마 자게나 고마고게나 자선시나 차사 미유도나 데가라선 소수게 강아시야나 소수게 디주비하게 된다 지고 미유지 바래 이날 내가 내다한테 탑람데 미라미라 차대로 봐.
Whether one is religious or not, Buddhist or not, everything that we engage in has as the objective, as the goal, the attainment of happiness, the eradication of suffering. This is the case for everyone and everything that we do. The reason you engage in your particular profession and you go to work every day is so as to create causes that you believe will lead to happiness and to eradicate the causes that would otherwise lead to suffering. But it's not just in terms of our employment and our physical activities, but so too with verbal activities. Our interaction, our verbal interaction, our communication with others, whether it is warm and gentle, or whether it's coming from a mind of anger and one's engaging in argument, or perhaps one is deceiving others, trying to take advantage of others. All that one says also comes from a motivation of wanting to accumulate the causes for happiness and to eradicate the causes that one believes will lead to suffering. And so too with physical behavior, where there is physical conflict, whether in the home or in society or even warfare between nations, this is motivated by a wish for happiness and to overcome suffering. Everything that beings do is motivated by the desire to abide in happiness and thereby, and to do so, to overcome all forms of problems and difficulties.
dine enza da tablam desugi nane da nga ji jiso nalia ganga se da digi juye tablam lobjo garyo was nga ji xian jangwo le ga le go le se bi dine gi chi yong bi tunjin jubi tone ma zo ganga se da digi juye di digi juye tablam de bi ji go le dai ji di bi ji ba de ji de le ina da nga zo chi yong bo tunjin jangjang ruba di zamgi nga zo ganga chasang be se tu go le be 디기 지기 띵이 대화도 톡톡으로 배서는 치용고 짱짱 야게까지 따베네 강아 차상 세트야요 말에 대단님도 강아지 리고래 근데 디기 띵이 대화세도 톡톡야요 말에 된사 치용고 짱짱 루비게 삼 디기 주비하다 동화세게 돈달라 치용고 튕겨 돈에 내가 강아세다 아주 디기 주비야 갈가서 용고래 되이네 디기 아니 띵이 대화 토야다 아니 지게 강아자와기 매바도 수토야 용고 말에 진짜 강아지기 지소 나는 강아지 지딘벨 직지도 강아지 럽죠 가지고선 럽죠 되네 강아지 이길 라비아도 럽죠제다 직시연 가래 장비네 지소자데 진짜 튕기용고 좋다 강아세다 되네 진네 내가 되네 진네 디지도 디진 디용그레 세베 제우 디용그레 되나 강아지 튕긴 지주소나 되네 강아세게 세베기다 탑람로 지금 아주 갈수 치용고 주탕 토네 강아세다 디기 주타디 아주 지소 나려야 디 럽죠 디티고래 디 토네 아주 내가 장에 렌 조고로 받아
Presentation thus far, presenting various steps. So look within yourself, within your own lived experience, to see that whether this is true. So to expand this then a little further, if we think of how societies are set up, they are established in a way so as to help the individuals within the community and the community as a whole to develop, to live together harmoniously and cooperatively, and to overcome problems and difficulties, and thereby to achieve happiness. To bring this about, there's an education system. Parents teach their children. The government also helps in bringing education. And as one gets a little older, one chooses a particular direction to go in for one's education. And the motivation at every level here is through the gathering of knowledge, I'll be able to overcome problems. My life will be better. This is the motivation that for each individual, as well as the parents and the community around them, how to make individuals and the community happier, providing education and independence on that education, then engaging in a variety of activities within society. So here we can think of the work people engage in, but also how they interact with each other. So this is the purpose, the motivation behind every level of decision one's taken, both the big ones and those immediate little decisions we take throughout our day. But when we look at the results, we can see, of course, there's been an incredible transformation in the world over the past centuries or past millennia too. But no one can say that this development of the non-mental world, the outer world, has led to lasting, stable happiness. Or to express that slightly differently, has led to a complete eradication of problems. So despite our focus being almost solely on transforming the non-mental world, the outer world, into transforming it so as to overcome problems and achieve happiness, lasting, stable happiness is yet to be achieved through this technique.
어당한지기 대지소비 날이야 안도시네 삼다제 디기주베 퉁게 동화세계 탑람되는 시베시단 거와 다 상기기 최세디게 가르순 거라서네 디날이야 가르롭종 지고라서네 당한지기 치 퉁긴 주야당 치 퉁긴 토네 강화세야 된 디기 주야도 용도 용거래때 디지부기 가서 강화세 투야당 안도 띵이 되어 톱토야 말해서 다조 가르치고선 조나는 삼루톤 당고 그래 삼루 소수게 삼루톤이 요와당제 지상 삼루들이야 안지기 요와당 삼루나라 가르가르 연구비도 하고 와제 디 삼루당한테 곰제 셈량아저 삼루나리야 지 다마라 연구를 ben에 현리아 지게 라신니가라 강아제에게 삼로지 연구를 라신니가를 팬비 삼로지 연구를 지수파 넘전에 라신니가를 강아영에게 삼로지 파매버서 안에 지게 라신니가를 팬비 삼로지 파 누구 슉처를 따지고 곰제 저 삼로대네 안에 디기줍투거리에서 디기줍에 동아세야 디지고리에서 지사 치용어보 튕ging 주고거래데 조 지삼마다도 조 낭 삼류편에 삼류교와 담비 ton에 디기 주고래스 안 동하세야디 디셔고 삼류교와 담비 ton에 셔고래스 제가 디기 삼류교와 담비 ton에 제바 있나 아니 띵기 동하 자와디면 수투야 지당 아니 띵기 대화 그디나 대화네 대화냐냐 이버 주투에기 삼류딘의 주투에 누버도 요래스 제가 삼류딘의 셔고래스 제가 최기 냠래셔야디기 삼루교 톤에 디기 주비다 동화 세타 강화 세타디 딜람든 지고래 디제들 최시고를 다가지 뒤래
What I've just presented in that previous segment is the approach that society takes. And this you'll know as well as I do. The focus is almost exclusively on the development of the non-mental world. So whilst we do need material comfort, we do need a material world that causes us as little harm as possible and aids the development of happiness, we also have recognized, hence you are here, that transforming the material world cannot lead to lasting happiness. It has not, and it can never lead to lasting happiness. Therefore, we need to look at the second source of both happiness and suffering, the inner world, the mental world. This is what is in society largely neglected, and where it is addressed, not done in a deep or truly transformative manner. But it's through shifting our focus to primarily the inner world, our way of thinking, and transforming our way of thinking, that we can actually eradicate the actual sources of our problems and attain a state of lasting, stable happiness. The happiness we desire, a happiness that is never punctuated by even a moment of pain or misery, this is to be found by transforming our minds. So therefore, we need to shift our focus from, instead of being primarily on the non-mental world, to being primarily on transforming our inner world. Or to express this differently, we need to shift our focus from our current approach, which thinks that through transforming our outer world, happiness will be achieved and problems will be overcome, to recognizing that it's primarily through transforming our inner world that happiness is achieved and problems are overcome. And transforming our way of thinking is the purpose of Buddhism. It is the meaning of Buddhist practice. If one is engaging in Buddhist practice, that by definition means one is engaging in changing one's way of thinking.
bene semgi dewa den lugi dewa digene semgi dewa de semdi be jik nyuba chewa shira nyuba chewa res 세상 강아지네 semgi 강아다 lugi 강아지네 semgi 강아지 be shuk chewa chegore bena nga 저기 지게 lugi semlia be 가나나 디기 직be 초나 가나라 직 여바이나 류리아 강아 유슈베네 강아디 하고 그거 말해. 그래서 류리아 나즈타야다 강아 쉐베네. 그래서 셈기 되기디 뉴베체라기 그 지기 년전에 안에 저 류지 강아다 하고 두고 말해. 배나 저게다 직제모제도 직락배제야다 풋볼 강부 전지벌 제기도와 제디급을 파슈께도 봐 직주 유야다 직수부디 W 나즈단 거래 제가 강아 수부 받아 그 수부 강아요래 강아 최고래 나즈단 거래 이나 셈리야 가라라시 제모래 뱅암데 지 가오 지우지 셈슈르 지 숙체모여 봐자 디류기 나자다 강아다 하고 고 말해 하고 고 말. 디 셈기 뉴버디 숙체다제 류기 강아데 봐 지인 냄샤가 하모거래. 나봐 직제모래 제사제 르르젠데 마 직르르젠 지도 셈기 안데 직대시 직셈슈르 슈드바 데스 마 예르데 데네 강바나드게 디와나게다 강아데 배 탕제데 신나 하고 그러와. 재산 대시 하모가 되가 셈기 뉴바데 마서 숙천보 슈셔바자 되게 지는 내샤제 아고요. 제가 되니까 류리아 강아로 주요베네 셈리아 디기단 가랑라 주요베네 디기 지유네지 류리 강아딩아도 하고 두 강아도 서로 두고만. 근데 반자데 가르스네 류기 강아데 셈니 류단 강아이 셈니 제바네 셈디 누슈 체여 봐. 뭐 김센디다.
The happiness that we long for and the suffering we wish to be freed from comes about either independence or arising from our mind or arising from our body. Of these two, the mind is incomparably more powerful. If we are mentally happy, physical suffering will not have much effect on us at all, or perhaps if we have really developed a stable mind, physical suffering will have no impact on us at all. For example, if we look at sports people, they endure tremendous physical hardship and pain whilst training, and in particular when in competition. If we think of rugby players or other physical forms of sport, whilst they're engaged in competition, their bodies are bashing against others, and yet they continue. And in that time, they're feeling quite excited, motivated to continue. It's only afterwards, when they're in the locker room or perhaps resting at home, that they come to recognize the pounding their body has taken. Here we see the power of the mind, that whilst one is experiencing tremendous physical hardship, one's not actually aware of it because the mind is very focused and is quite joyous. So this is widely recognized in society, but it's good now for you to look at that, to become very clear of the power the mind has when compared to the body. When suffering or pleasure arises from the mind, it has so much more power than when suffering or pleasure arises from the body.
Desa kubia yagochi desa yagochi gala de anjige dulo zubol ya jikbe jiktrebo jambu dike ba jik diago gwe dene jike saheru shimburo shu sebene di kapsulya semlya be majiba semlya chuduge semna ganga shu jebene da jik desa kiwo yagochi de je jike ane jike dulo de yagoro gwe je kala de yagosane jik 디기디 용고로와 룰디기 용고르데 이네 셈레 강한 남자디기 직파 디셈디 니버 슈체라제 디디기 바다 하고고 말다 디기디 중화다 하고고 말 제가 강하데 말 디기 초고 말 디가르스네 셈낭 셈다 류기 디기디기나 지산 낭게 셈디 슈 니버 슈체베 또비 아니 강하데 삼로도 슈체와 신부시 코르드 아니 룰리야 디기 요바다 하고 두고 말와 제가 디니 나저기 셈 치용외비게 디기 주야디나 류게 두고 칼라야고 사드 디기 야 주볼레 디기 주야다 안 둘로다 직 돼서 야고 디기 디기 찍어때 이나 셈지 강아디 슉 첨부여 가서 디 되기 마서 마기와라 슉 차려와 지선 디 가서 셈이 니버디 슉 차와 임바디 김첸디 시고라다디.
A further example that you also will have experience of is most of you will live in comfortable homes. Some people have incredibly comfortable homes, and you'll most days eat very nice, delicious food. But when you're at home, but you have come home perhaps from work where you're experiencing many challenges, or perhaps in your home with your family members, you're experiencing many challenges. Despite your comfortable environment, you're not at peace, you're not happy. You may even be eating a delicious meal, but because of mental unhappiness, no pleasure from that meal arises. In fact, one will hardly even be aware of the taste of the food. So this is something that people have all too much experience of. And it also serves to show the power of the mind over the physical, over the body. That when the mind is suffering, even when we're in physically comfortable environments or eating delicious food or hearing pleasant music, it doesn't have an impact. it doesn't have the strength to overcome our mental suffering. So here too, we see the power of the mind over the body.
대인자 당하도 두치네 두다 디송하는 중에 냠뇨이 띵하는 차상게 경험들에 냠뇨하는 차상 냠뇨 여바로 바디 디셰에 가서는 두치네 연구도 와서면다 두스한테 삼로시다네 간데시 뉴버체에 가르도 선배 삼단은 삼로도 뉴버체에 임바자고 두고도 와 당하도 삼로시다제 양자 삼다베네 나즈려 직계신마 직인지고셰다 동거 넘겨도 약보돼야다 지 류기 죄바디에 약보된 샤리야 팬백이 로제게 류기 죄람들이야데 디 가르신 리도 선두 삼다바나 나로 삼로들이야 샤리에 팬베 삼로지 직디 로보치긴 스베 샤리에 팬베 삼로지 계속나 니기 애니 직계진에 약보시 돼야다 나데 약보돼야 지 미기 따야되네 직 동대 넘기네 회기 뭐게 삼로 나라야 가랑라 여야지 돼야 안 류기 자와되나 팬비 자와져야 돼 지수샤상 가르치는 연구들은 나 삼로 셴리에 팬비 삼로 주에나 니기 견지의 용도도 와 다나 삼로야 콩로 셴리야 마가위 삼로지 되네 게여도 아니 가르치고 전에 류기 넘겨지나 베스 미션다 통해는 셈마기버 차야지다 아니 치기네 직주 셴리야 뇌비 치리야다 아니 그 류기토네나 샹로로바제 잡了류기토네 샹리야 체비게 뇌바제야디 지산 두수는 류가게 쥐바 야다 마야 용다면데 류가게 쥐바디 약보디 용구도 약보 용무도 라신 니게래 펜바지 용구디 펜바도 용무스 니 가고라 라로스나 당보 군로 삼로 나려야 삼바 상보시게바나 류가 쥐바디 샹리야 펜바 삼롱한바 체외 사바 네베 삼마께바나 디 류가 쥐바 제샬레 네바 세상한테 류가 쥐바다 디니 레디 차상 나 삼로르네 리기여바디 따세바하고 두도 두 신앙한테 심주진에 디네 가는스 리기도 세비에 삼다베나 두 신에 나 삼로되는 용구여바디 세보시 하고 두고로와
These illustrations I've just mentioned, I'm confident you'll all recognize them as being very true from your own lived experience. The purpose of mentioning these illustrations, which are obvious to everyone here, is not so that you merely recall the power that the mind has, but so that you think about this deeply so as to shift your focus to developing the mind as that being the source of happiness, and that being the source of a lasting, stable happiness, rather than having as a focus transforming our outer world. So to give a further illustration, if you think of times, either when you yourself or when you've observed it elsewhere, where you've had the wish a sincere wish to help someone, this would probably be someone that you feel close towards, that you have a feeling of responsibility towards, and a tender feeling towards. And you sincerely, from your own side, reach out and help them. Now if you recall how you felt at the time, and how you interacted with the person, both in terms of your behavior and your speech, you'll recognize your speech would have been gentle. Your behavior would have been caring and tender. And this you would have experienced yourself, and you would have observed in others as well. The converse, though, sadly, is also true. When the mind is enraged, or perhaps at a far slighter level, frustrated, and then when one has to interact with others, one's physical behavior is much more uptight, tense. One's way of speaking, the tone is very different, the words you use are very different. So both of these illustrations you will have lived and you will have observed. And what they also show, as with the previous illustrations, is the primacy of the mind, of one's intention. Whether one is sincerely wishing to help, or whether perhaps one is helping against one's will, one's physical behavior, one's facial expression, and one's way of speaking is very different. So here again we see the primacy of the mind in how we interact with others and how, whether our mind is open and gentle and loving or aggressive, how that transforms our behavior, physical and verbal.
Dini inza, that Sangi Yi Chue Shadi, Jazangandu Samlo Nalia, Samlo Control the Shella, Tsewe Samba, Nubach Kebane, Digi Genchene, Ranshin Nigala Ganga Yungduas, Jazanganga di Samlo Desulena, some Dinishuna, Ranshin Nigala Ganga Yungores, Jazaganga Yagi Gudi, Denige, Samlo di Chagore, di Samlo di Mevasores, di Samlo di Gichu Yomares. 实际上，现在分别三把单、前别三把、这位三把绝把呢，你个什么得来的那个就另外一个绝把，让来判把，先来把，让些你个来地上去，地区用多啊，你什么地方就过过来的，你也给当过过来，实际上就地区用也给有啥本啊说呢，的那个什么的，你也给当过过来，的公费的当过来。 实际上，当然就来刚刚这个下来那边上把单，7月上把单，让些你个来刚刚的没好呀的，其实你没把收过来噻的。实际上，去年们去噻的，的那个刚刚用呀的，地区用呀个，什么的那些这边呢刚刚用过了，什么的那些口呢东澳用过了，那地区用出过了。其实，第什么你的地热大，实际上的地没把收过来，实际上的地区用呀个，让些你个来地区用呀什么的。 公过来，你把钱当过来，第年们接过来噻的，确实的是的，大家就确实的。你那个要我切，什么东澳用呀当，什么怕没法做呀当，让些你个来电话地区这边个什么的，以公平的当年们接把的了的，确实把是我，但的确实的，陆军确实噻的，你年接他的，他不能的西过了，但都那的人。
Recognizing the primacy of our mind in terms of achieving happiness and overcoming problems and difficulties. Through these illustrations and your own lived experience, you will have seen how true this is. And this truth is not something that we alone have recognized, and it's also not something that I'm presenting here that's particularly new. In fact, the Buddha himself presented this 2,500 years ago. He taught that from minds such as anger, attachment, jealousy, and pride, all our problems, sufferings, and difficulties arise. And that is the case for each and every suffering being. And it's through those minds arising and then being enacted or acting under their influence that through our speech and our behavior, we bring problems into the lives of others. Here we recognize the primacy of harmful minds in our own suffering and the problems we bring into the lives of others. Therefore, it's these minds, these ways of thinking that we need to eradicate. And on the other side, wholesome minds, such as love and compassion, minds where with sincerity, we hold others as dear. Their mere arisal brings happiness to ourselves. And their expression, our physical behavior or our facial expression, our way of speaking, leads to us benefiting others too. So the happiness of certainly ourselves and then adding to pleasant experiences for others comes from our wholesome, our virtuous ways of thinking. So then these need to be cultivated. So the meaning then of practicing Buddhism is cultivating wholesome ways of thinking and eliminating or abandoning unwholesome or non-virtuous ways of thinking. Or to express it slightly differently, building and strengthening a habituation to wholesome, virtuous ways of thinking, and at the same time weakening our habituation to unwholesome ways of thinking. This is the meaning of Buddhist practice. Training our mind in this way. And this is the technique to achieve lasting happiness, free from any problems and difficulties, when our habituation to wholesome ways of thinking is completely and perfectly developed, and our current habituation to unwholesome ways of thinking is completely eradicated, perfectly eradicated. Then we have achieved a state of lasting happiness. And in this process of development, we will experience greater levels of happiness, and we will bring ever more happiness into the lives of others through our interactions with them. So therefore, the meaning of Buddhist practice is on changing our way of thinking, transforming our way of thinking.
지게 겨울지네 기디나 송고래 제산 잠제 세팅한도 셴려 제외 삼바단 잠제 세팅한도 점블링 셈전 미 차상 개념의 제화시에샤 제산 점리 시디 영야데 잠제디 평유도 하는 안주 차상직 미사직 삼다외네 잠제디여나 냠내여나 디기 평고래 근데 지소지는 잠제 냠내네 디기 평고래 점리 시디 영야데 잠제 냠내고 제상한도 잠제 밀리야 잠제 냠내데 슉샤 땅고도 세데 겨울지기 디나 디 송고로와
This was taught by the Buddha 2,500 years ago, and by great masters from then to now, including His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He encourages the cultivation of love and compassion because he knows this will benefit every being who cultivates it. To the extent that one cultivates love and compassion in your own mind, greater happiness will be experienced. And through the cultivation of love and compassion in your own mind, your family will benefit from their interactions with you. Those in your community who are fortunate enough to interact with you will also benefit to the extent that you develop love and compassion within us. And the way to transform our families, our societies, the world in its entirety, is for individuals to cultivate love and compassion in their hearts.
다디 상여 줌된 코로나 지체상 냠용을 토네 코로나의 냠용사 냠용된 순거로와 지상여 줌된 코로나와 예비 부고로와 지상 변조들 강아 요말 원천라는 직강아 요말 원체 친구 연구에 변조 망보여를 코로나다 망보 쉬워요 이네 디잠기다 디기 죽투고 민도 제사다 간에서 죽고도 선비게 파 심주제 삼노당 제바체도 제산 삼노두선 삼류톤에 야게 땅에 톤에 곰제나는 진의 직디기 죽고도 선비당 아주 강아 요야다 디기 요야기 유조의 삼노디레샤 상아 소소라나게 삼노디레샤 제산 소소라나게 삼노디 강아 요야기 유디 파메바스 디기에 삼로데 야 공패당 고도와 선배 데네게 삼단지 그런 게 두스 냠내제 탈치네 산지고 뭐톱 데네 그런 게 냠용 지회데 버팅 알아서 야 두슬롭진지 거래 제가 디소 체닉 나시레스 나저게 낭 셈게 체닉 차고로 와다 제가 유되는 아주 체닉도 유되는 시세반에 레부되는 용거래야 돼 제가 삼로되는 시대바나 삼로되는 유되는 사바나 아니 유되는 레부되는 용거래 삼로되는 시다나 레부되는 용거래 세베 제가디 무인니스도 튠바 대체에서야디 무인니스도 튠바 멤버 아니 직다가스 드라다제 송셔바 많이 바제 무인니스도 대야 소수게 냠는제 냠용을 통해 제부 무인에서 제부 줍제 냠용을 통해 되는 마 손샤베게 될 최고 손 최시고 다 최세야디 먼저 삼로 뒤와 땅내 디기주비다 탑람토이 주 규되네 사바데네 제부된 용거에 세비다 되네게 탑람 된바디 다디 탑람 된제 먼저 디톤에 지금 먼저 삼로 땅 제바제 네 지금 냠는 제들라 먼저 최세바시고다
The founder teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni, he taught all his extensive teachings were taught based from his own experience. He was born into royalty, he was a prince, and therefore he would have had an abundance of material comfort, power, and influence. Yet he recognized that despite having fame, power, influence, and wealth and comfort, this alone could not lead to lasting happiness. The mind has to be transformed. And the process of transformation is merely this: strengthening the habituation to wholesome ways of thinking so that they become ever more innate to us, and weakening our habituation to unwholesome ways of thinking. The way this then is experienced is that one's spontaneous response will be with minds that are virtuous. And responses such as anger, desire, self-interest will not spontaneously arise so frequently or last so long. So therefore the Buddha taught based on his own experience. That is, through transforming your mind, lasting happiness is experienced. And this is a scientific approach, the science, an inner science, that from specific causes, results will come. And this is shown through experience, that through the cultivation of this set of causes, that set of results will follow. And anything that's found in the Buddha Dharma that is not found to be in accordance with reality is to be abandoned. His Holiness has said this clearly many times. Buddha Dharma needs to be in accordance with reality. And the way that it is established as such is through each practitioner, each individual Buddhist, gathering knowledge and applying the knowledge in the way that is taught, and thereby checking upon their own experience whether it is in accordance with reality or not. And this is also the process that leads to transforming the mind. So therefore, the meaning of Buddhist practice is to train your mind, to strengthen your habituation to wholesome ways of thinking, and thereby break our habituation to unwholesome ways of thinking. This is the meaning of Buddhist practice.
Dine zadang jiki shuye de tanda nyingbo de kare shu go resene jeza du sinang du se samla tang jeba che sam tang go go da sam ta ne jeza nga jiki 강아 세디 치용업에 돈에 강아 리고를 치용업에 돈에 디기 두고 나랑 선배 된데 니 연구도 와서베다 마저 강아 요하다 요사다 동아 요사다 디기 요사디야 치용업 나섬도 니가네 연구하래 제 다디 디 연구여 봐디 다디 디 연구를 쉬어라데 데니스간에서 연구도 세디 결혼해서 삼다 제바치나 지고로 봐 대제 인해도 쉬온다디 마 쉬어봐 다 데니기다 치 디기 두다 치고보다 나 삼르된 디기 두다니 가르 숙체 열선 나 삼르된 디기 두비도 숙치고래 가 삼르도 숙치고래 제 동아여야 대 치고비도 동아여다 나 삼르된 동아여는 나 삼르된 두게대 삼르디 숙치고래 제자 동아여야다 디기 두베데 나 삼르된 치고비도 두인데 숙치주지나 나 삼르디 숙체 용거래 제 지나다 디나신도 지네 양제 10차고 삼당도 지용업의 튕게 야고 야 용하다 지서 라신이가래 펜바용하디 낭 삼로 공로 삼로든 라렌 리고래 지서 삼로든 리고래스 지사 라신이가래 뇌비게 륜업이 쪄바다 되니기 지용업이 자워 두게 되나나 나 삼로든 리고래스 제자 자와 나 삼로를 두고래스 되니 인자 되니게 삼로 되니지 코나 제보 되니지 용거래 삼 되니 코나 제보 되니지 용거래 시대 제가 나 삼로 되니 용거 바디 제대 다형서 디스천 제바시나 하고 그래 되니게 난 되니 인자 당아도 삼로데 용하게다 삼로데 용구 여바나 삼로데 유와 가네스 땅고 그래 라비도 맞아 나로 삼로 나려야 지게 네베 삼바다 제외 삼바티 디레드네 륜하게 남주간 슬리도 심주제나 가서 하고 그러와 제가 디 먹어야 돼. 디 마음이 아파서 그래서 다낭 삼로 될이야 아니 직 잠배 삼바 제외 삼바 주나 륜하게 줘봐 간 슬리도 디기 아니 그 가르 팬도 가르 용습이 라신이가 팬바 준거 봐도 어디지 삼로도 고구리 했어야 돼. 제가 당아도 열개 땅에 가르던 것은 시안에 팬배세 봐도 잠제 삼로도 슈퍼 출 땅고 그래서 두지는 지사나 상계 점내디게 손비게 디 냠용어 토네 코롱기 냠용어 토네 송셰 코롱고 곰 잡티니 제바제 냠용어 토네 송샤바레 지사디 아주 무인니스데 튠바 지 규데니스는 제보된시 용거래 해야지 지사 데니게 상계기 최 냠는 제 해야지 데니게 둥아 용하다 강아 용에 삼로도 파도 라신니가레 펜바용에 삼로데 뭐 공패다 땅 냠내제들 상기비 최제세 된실레 고레스던 라고던다 다 더르시 라파로세 디니스 고레세 디슈바레다 제가 디인자 경험 중에도 상기기 최제세 최냠내제도 어디니실레도 와슴베다 조 라파로시 데디니스도 와슴베게 삼로 코야다 안지 치 튕긴게 돈에 강아주 세다다 낭 삼로든 주다데 다 럽zam로지 데니기 슈바레 안디 돈에 경험을야 안지 지기 견도 용하다 팽여래서무도 데네 자 경험을 디리기 디가려야 소수게 삼로 제바 같이 제비네 안디 야 판도 쳐를 줘야다 삼로 누가 공부도 줘야 돼 켜바시고요래
The essence of what I've presented here in the summary, in this introduction, is the primacy of our mind in terms of achieving happiness and overcoming problems. That our mind is the primary source of both happiness, temporary happiness, as well as lasting happiness, as well as the primary source of suffering and problems. So I presented illustrations earlier that you'd be familiar with, that shows how true this is. But you need to investigate these to come to see for yourself that this is the case. Moreover, I presented that the way we interact with others, our physical behavior, our verbal communication, this comes about independent on our way of thinking. So therefore, if we are interacting with others in a way that benefits them, helps them, if they're in a time of need, or they're in a state where they are happy and they're just looking for companionship, whatever our interaction is with others, our state of mind is what determines how we interact with them and whether our interaction is beneficial or harmful. So here too, I pointed out the primacy of mind, that it's our mental intention that leads to whether our speech is harmful or harmful or wholesome. This too is something that I don't think is particularly controversial in society, but merely to hear it and accept it and move on is to miss the greater point of what I've been making. The meaning of Buddhist practice is to transform our mind. To transform our mind, we need to gather knowledge, and then, like a scientist who has a theory based on knowledge, then investigate to see whether this is true or not. And the process of investigation is looking at our own mind. To the extent that we see that the primary source of our problems and difficulties is our way of thinking, and that the primary source of happiness is our way of thinking, we will start to shift our focus from achieving happiness from the outer world, overcoming problems by focusing on the outer world, and rather deal with how our mind responds to what is around us, and have as our focus transforming our mind. And the way to transform our mind is through developing habituations to wholesome minds. But to do so, one needs to recognize first what wholesome minds are. These will be presented, and then you need to come to see whether minds such as love and compassion are minds that actually do benefit oneself and others. And similarly, minds such as anger, jealousy, pride, are these minds that in all circumstances actually do cause harm? This will be presented, and then it's for you to look within yourself to see whether these are harmful or not. And to the extent that one looks within oneself, the motivation will arise to transform our way of thinking. And this means developing an ever stronger habituation to wholesome ways of thinking, where minds such as love, compassion, and wisdom arise spontaneously within you, no matter what circumstances we encounter. This is the sign of your Buddhist practice bearing fruit, that the habituation to wholesome ways of thinking is becoming deeply ingrained. And going along with that, the converse minds such as aggression, self-interest, harmful intent, a self-centered attitude, these will proportionately weaken. And our habitual response will be ever less about my own self-interest, but how I can benefit others. For this to come about, just requires gathering of knowledge and an application of that knowledge through thinking for yourself, looking at yourself again and again, repeatedly, over a sustained period. And in this way, your mind will change. And changing our mind, transforming our mind, is the meaning of Buddhist practice.
다진 마슈디 당보 나무구루 초튜몽고 우르 군죄비 파이신으로 보셔라 뒤세데 that in my and do go to Tambo Cha Sawadi Sungore.
Now let's turn to the text and the very first verse. Homage to my lamas who bestow all siddhis, both ordinary and supreme. I bow at your feet, my lamas, my wish-fulfilling jewels.
Zandelia Namo Guru Siddhi, that's this Sanskrit Tsikche. The Namo said the Cha Sawa se, Guru said the Lama Segura, Jazan Lama la Cha Salo Segura Dandala.
So the first line is actually a Sanskrit line, Namo Guru. This we'll know from some other pujas that we do. And the meaning is as has been written of Namo Guru, is as is written in English, homage to my lamas.
Cho Tumong or Kunzi, Paijin Nurbugi Shabla du, said that Delia Lamala Cha Sawa Segura, Jazan Chodan, Tumong Guru. Chasa ba Junsa de Lamalet in the Yungore, Chesa Choda Tumong or Pazo, Zegi, and the Paishin Rubu, La Chabla du Sedu, and the Rankel Lama, and the Chike Lamalia, and the Chike Kusu Yunden, Kusun Yunden, Yunden Jabada, and the getting Jesu Tempe Tone, and Devada, getting Jesu Tempe Tone, and the Chasavare.
The second two lines in the homage, who bestow all siddhis, both ordinary and supreme, I bow at your feet, my lamas, my wish-fulfilling jewel. So here, one recalls the tremendous qualities of one's lama, of his qualities of his body, speech, and mind. And through recalling those, naturally a sense of appreciation will arise within oneself. And the natural expression of that appreciation would be in paying of homage or to one's teacher. And here it's expressed in the verse as bowing at your feet. This is then a physical expression of one's deep heartfelt appreciation for all the qualities our spiritual teachers, our lamas, have developed within themselves.
Chodan Tumong Murup Ladu, Dangazuke, Shesuna Murupche, Shesamajuna, Jevusura, Jevurupchi, Wada, Nazuki, Dichabalatine, Yamlin Dichabalatine, Jevu, and Tumongi, Jevu, Tumon, Nerap, Jewu in the Shore. Tumon Mayibas, the Chog is the Chor Tarduk, San Yokopa, that Choda Tumor, the Tumon Murup, that Jig, Nazuki. Seti ticket, Yawachima, Hadamiko, Toya Lasopada, and the Jig, Setelia, Shenle, Pempig on the Zutu, Alasopa, then the Winshia Lasopa, the Nigga Toya Tiki, Lamigi, the Netobia, Tablam Danger, and the Latin to water, Jesa de Lamading to get Chimbores. Now that's some Tamjig, the San Diego about two Chota, Chok said, Tardu, Chok Murup said it, Yamlin, Jabala, and Jivo, San Diego, Toya Dia, and Lamale, Lamigi. Lama Latina to war, Chazal did Lamadi Choda Tumor, Zulzeba said, Chazada, the Nigi, and then Tamju Juyaki, Mansul Rayagate, Sultan Lama Latin Regore, said, don't that sit down what you don't that this more. Tumon Urusura Kiwa Chimal had a muco, Kiwa Chimal had a muco, to your Covandice. The Nyamlin Jabaladina Javala to Gurua, Chesadi Jehurua, Chesadi Geshe, and it said the Latin is your combaladine, she near to be, and it's to two Tovia, one share Tovia, just a Tumon or so, this Chaza.
In the second line, looking at this term siddhis, both ordinary and supreme. So in the third verse, I've translated in the first line, siddhis in the English, yogic attainments. So to understand the Sanskrit siddhis or the English yogic attainment, it's an honorific word, and if one was to use the normal colloquial word, it would just be that of a result. So we could then read the second line in the first verse, who bestows all results, both ordinary and supreme. What's the difference between ordinary and supreme results? The supreme result refers, or the supreme siddhi, or the supreme yogic attainment, refers to the attainment of Buddhahood, of enlightenment. That is the supreme result. Then all others would be referred to as common or ordinary. Ordinary results or common results are only ordinary or common in relation to the supreme. They would include the other results that one attains on the path. For example, attaining the result of a good rebirth in our future life, a rebirth as, say, a human or a god. Or good results, siddhis, in this life would be, for example, attaining clairvoyance through the cultivation of single-pointed concentration, and thereby being able to have emanations to benefit others. So these siddhis or yogic attainments or results, both ordinary and supreme, these are all attained by relying on one's Lama, one's spiritual teacher. All good qualities, therefore, are attained through relying on one's spiritual teacher. Hence, at the outset, homage is paid to one's Lamas.
And Paijin Nobo Shabla to use the Pase de Pamase, Pamasore, Padama, Anzulia, Zambanalaya, Puye, Padang, Zumi, Mili Pasha, the Pichikan, Mili Gedi, Pamaletine Kigore, Shazanganzo Pamaletine, Kiva di Midi, and another Pamaletine Kidua, she's a Pamamena to see Yungor, she's a Pamatokor, Pamaletine Kigores. She's another Pamaletine Kiva Nashin, Pamanashin, the Rangi Kiwi Shin, the Rangi Lama, and Korongta, Rangi Lama, the Sosolia, Yenden Kie, the Shazan, and Pudige, another Pudige, Pamaletine Kiva Nashin, my Yenden Kie, the Shazan, the Lama Latiniki, which is a Lama Kuron Pamanajin, Pamanashi, Pugiege, Pamanashi, Nigula, Nazugula, and then Chasa Junsadi, and the Pamanashi Lama Kuron, Sachi, Papa said this word.
The third line, about your feet, my Lamas. The Tibetan here literally is not the word for Lama, that is the meaning. The word is actually that of father, which is also the abbreviation for the word for parent. So we understand it then to mean parent. So the reason why the word parent is used here is that we would generally say in society that from our parents, from their care and guidance that they give to us, and as following their example, as following their advice, we develop our good qualities, independence on the care and guidance from our parents. Then the meaning in our spiritual context is that our Lamas, our spiritual teachers, are likened to our parents, because they too care for us and guide us. And independence on our relying on their guidance and care, we will develop all good spiritual qualities. So therefore, the second line, I bow at your feet, my parents, would be the literal, but the meaning is what has been translated here, my Lamas, my spiritual teachers, because it's through relying on them that we will develop all good spiritual qualities.
나중에 이신 노르보세요다. 이신 노르보세다 먼저 노르보세죠. 그래서 당한 저기 단예마 노르보 간의 수용금에 당한 저기 지게 통원여야다 직 매르와다 직내서를 고르마도. 당한 저 대상상 중의에서 통화여대데 노르보세야데 중의에나 세다 도제 팔람다. 안데서 노르보세요와. 진짜 내내기 세다 도제 팔람다 우이디기 노르보래. 가서 디수 여바이나 나 저기 가서네 지게 사야동야 도로 면제제야 아니 가서 롭장제를 튕긴 미신 강알야 로고제세 투여게 강바다 모르 차산데 디티네 갈 강삼지 가지고 강아세야 된 디기듯이 셰반 치고벌에 되네 디기주다 강아 세타디 요래 세디듯이 셰반 하신 되네게 노고 대수 여바이나 될라되네 갈 강삼기 강아세야 된 디기주야디 줍투고 와 제가 노고 세야디 강아 세야 제가 되네게 여바이나 될라되네 가지고 강아 망보단 디기 망보 줍투고레스 노고 세야디 디나시 노보라 되네 가지고 디기주바 나시 아니 Lama di nobo nashi res. Chesa lama dela tene lamiki ngāzulia labjong cheche, dela tene ngāzulia kanga seyata, digi tuyagi, paktumyabadi, nekabki digi tuptugore, tadugi chokta tumu nguruptiki ne, lama digi ma dela tene tuptugore. Dezenza lama kyoran pama nashi re, lama nashi, alama di ishigi nobo nashi re, chesa ngāzu digi tuyata, kanga chokta tumu ngurup chesan ruyalaya, Lama di pama nashi, ishigi nobo nashi re, sedu dushideda lamegi Yende Lama de Gyatso Liadus Lobsang Dorje Gyatso Digi Juya da Dunga Seyala Pando Dini Jugore Jin Lama de Pemas Ketin Chimboria Sempege Dalamigi Kuson to Yende de Lamigi and Janglia Jin Chimbo Ketin Chimbo in Batenja Lama la Tape Zichu Jenedine Shabla du Sider Lama and Chasegi is what the Shabla du Seneda Lamigi Danzuke Chigma du si de pa chu chi la ma le zu je ba na nga zu go di ne la mi gi ma shap kal ma thu che ma cha che de gu du sina da zu gu she la me ne nyam du ya da je ya lang che zu gu che de ya che go ba
In the third line, this term wish-fulfilling jewel. This then relates to something from ancient mythology, a jewel that could fulfill all wishes of beings. So whether something existed, something like that ever existed or not, who knows? But for our purposes, we can just relate it to ordinary jewels such as diamonds. So one can easily then imagine, if one has an abundance of diamonds and sells them, then one would be able to overcome all material suffering and have an abundance of worldly happiness as well. So this would be the purpose of tremendous wealth, as expressed here through jewels. Here, though, the meaning in our spiritual context of comparing our Lama to wish-fulfilling jewels, or our Lamas to wish-fulfilling jewels, is that just like ordinary jewels can lead to the overcoming of ordinary happiness, the attainment of ordinary happiness, and the temporary overcoming of suffering, through relying on our spiritual teachers, we will be able to attain all forms of happiness and overcome all forms of suffering. Unlike ordinary wealth, which can only lead to the attainment of limited happiness and temporarily overcoming problems, relying on our lamas leads us to attain both temporary happiness as well as the happiness of mental paths and the ultimate happiness of enlightenment, and thereby leading to the overcoming of corresponding levels of problems and difficulties. And then combining wish-fulfilling jewels with the preceding term, my lamas or my parents, in the same way that we have a sincere sense of appreciation for the kindness and care that our parents gave us, and thereby we were able to grow up into the people that we are. We also look to our lamas, recognizing the tremendous kindness that they show us in their guidance and care that has come about through their own endeavors and such hardships that they've overcome, similar to our parents. Reflecting on this, a sincere appreciation for them arises, a respect and an appreciation. And the way this would traditionally be expressed, like we did at the beginning of the class, is bowing at the feet of the Buddhas and our spiritual teachers. And when this is done sincerely, where one imagines placing one's forehead at the feet of the Buddha, for this to be done sincerely, a deep appreciation needs to arise within one's heart for the value that they bring into your life and the lives of others too.
다디 차사와 아지스람의 차사 당한 저게 되네 제일 관리를 당에 되네지마 지금 마셰기 되네 시기인스베 점버 담자와서 지금 뭐래 안디젤이야 안가 담자라는 켈린스와 이 되네 시기인스 이 되네 시기인스베 켈린들과 담자서 리그래 디 제일 관리고서는 안데 안 저도 되네기 지금 내시에디 경험서 약보지 냠네 냐아스다 왜 약보지 냐제 안에 삼로 약보지 두스 당고그래서 냠바 구와서 지금 진짜다 네 다디디 차차와 되네 좀바 담자와다 냠바 구와서 돼 어디 제일 용해야 돼.
This first verse then is the verse of homage or prostration. Thereafter comes the second verse, which is follows in the traditional presentation, the promise to compose, where the topic that will be presented is outlined, and the promise to complete the composition is presented, as well as a request to those who would either directly receive this teaching from the author or later come across the text and be taught its meaning, to listen well, to listen attentively.
Alright, na dine shire, na du shine, de jason chong the jiwaro chen dan jigir da kan zu de kama juice jiwa tuwa, jiwara shuna. De sha sha shi din ma chen shi, nyong jabla shi.
But we only have a few minutes left, so this afternoon we can start with the second verse. But if you have some questions now, then please feel free to ask. We still have a few minutes. Teppo?
I just wasn't. I just sort of want to clarify whether it was mentioned that clairvoyance, we're able to get the results, the ordinary and supreme. So those results of a good rebirth and also clairvoyance. In that you mentioned, clairvoyance comes from calm abiding, but also you mentioned emanation. So I just want to check: does emanation can it come before directly realizing emptiness?
So the question is in the context of ordinary siddhis or yogic attainments or results, and that of emanations was mentioned, and the way it was said implied that it came from clairvoyance. So I just want to check: can emanations come prior to the direct realization of emptiness?
Truba seura truba dede yungruwa dede domani to go mare mazu shine trup samde yungwe shine trup che shine trup savechla samde yungwe shi se trup yungore di yosone ni shine anzu yaje trup yore migi ngwenshesa nawe ngwenshesa da anjige ngwenshe truya di trup yungore di domani to ho yo mare 제가 투몽으로 세대 뒤서 마즈를 낭발을 낭배 매발을 연구를 뒤서 등에서 신경 주야 여러와 되네 신경 주 되네 주발에 되네 근데 뭐시 주 되네 게 지게 주주돼야 되네 뭐시 주야 되네 리주고는 주주돼야 등에서 공부도 주고 그래서 돈이 또 와야 말해 네 남자링이 말해 네 신의 줍차네 신의 무엇이세야 되게 고주보 신의 줍차네야 아 저게 무엇이냐 주세 주고 그래 대대도 주야 내가 먹어래 네 줍차에 제라 아니 신의 양 무엇이 줍차데 양자 디자 무엇이 레사베 양자 남사 디 주주된 되어 용말 양자 주주되게 양자 주야지 공부가 용 디 공부할 띵에서 공부할 때네 안 디데네 줍두고 그래서 디 투몽 우리 이제 돈이 또 와요 말해
The attainment of the ability to emanate is not something unique to Buddhists and does not require a direct realization of emptiness. It can be achieved by non-Buddhists too. The foundation is the development of a calm abiding, single-pointed concentration. So the sequence is something like this. When one attains calm abiding, one has the ability to hold the object single-pointedly for as long as one wishes, and I don't want to demean it, but that is all one achieves. Then one, if one so chooses, can develop other yogic attainments or siddhis, which would be included within those which are ordinary or common, such as clairvoyances. And there are a number of clairvoyances. There's the mental clairvoyance, there's clairaudience, there's and several of them. Once the clairvoyances, with some effort, have been achieved, then, if one chooses, one can develop. So this is, maybe you could say, a side quality that one can develop. The clairvoyances are a side quality that someone who has achieved single-pointed concentration can develop if they choose. It's not that you achieve single-pointed concentration, you can hold an object as long as you wish for, and therefore you have clairvoyance and clairaudience and so forth. These need to be developed specifically after having developed clairvoyance, after having developed single-pointed concentration. Having then done so and developed single-pointed concentration, and thereafter the clairvoyances, one can then, if one chooses, develop the capacity to be able to emanate. So therefore, this can be achieved, the possibility to produce emanations can be achieved both by Buddhists and non-Buddhists, and therefore does not require the wisdom realizing emptiness, which is something unique to Buddhists.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Then when you do reach the stage of realizing emptiness directly, is then it a choice to develop emanations, or is that then automatic?
So when one later does realize emptiness directly, does one spontaneously produce emanations, or at that point, just like with clairvoyance, that this ability needs to be intentionally developed?
Did Jansarwa, many Jansarwa, just Papa in the Jansara Capital. Papa in the many Moshi Gawa to Wars and many Lam Yamin Juliamagin Lation to Washington, their Hore. Just not that Lam Yamin Leje, Solama, the Jolabalan, and she can hold on to Dura. Just that is only many. Solemn Nala told you one share died to war. The public go out of Sone, she saw to Guascayamare, to Guayamare. The day you call Nuba Cher, the Gaze, Comshi, things in the Gaze, Nuba Cher, and Dizam go to Bama to Tuyada, Chick, one share, Chick Ma, Tong Tuyadi, Nuba Cher or what, Cabaret or what. One share. Tour was it? Things like a new bachelor in the Matatura, because they should change a child like Majatura, Chihuahua.
We are talking about the Mahayana.
The Tessin lady, Taman Chibarmini, Papa to do it, she's near to Tsare, then Yana, Casore, Jubatuagi, that's Sosugi, Yungure, that they do Beni, Pabala, wishing you top the motto said, Pabala, many Tamala, Pava in the Ajik, wishing you Matoka, Yungure, Tesugita, Jubatuagi, Pajit, Yungumare.
So certainly for those of for a path to be attained, a mental path to be attained, this is something that Buddhists do, and it would be the entry into their first of the 5 paths. A prerequisite to generating a path is the attainment of calm abiding. So therefore it is, or single pointed concentration. It's a prerequisite that prior to attainment of a path, that one will have achieved calm abiding. For those who are going to progress along the Mahayana paths, when it is without doubt, it is certain, it is pervasive, that they will, by the time they realize emptiness directly, they will have long since developed the clairvoyances and the ability to create emanations. So this, I would say, is pervasive. So someone who has attained the Mahayana path of seeing, who realizes emptiness directly, and is a Arya Bodhisattva, will have long since been able to develop, to emanate. for a non-Mahayanist Buddhist, a Theravadan, then I would imagine that there'll be those who train in this ability and those who do not. But certainly for the Mahayanist, I would say it's pervasive. They all would have. So that would answer Tepel's questions. And then to say in addition, that just like someone who goes to the gym and gets really strong, they will be able to lift up heavier and heavier weights as they train. So too, from the first moment one attains calm abiding, as one develops one's calm abiding, so it becomes ever more powerful, one will be able to create ever more emanations. By the time one comes to realize emptiness directly, then one's calm abiding will be exceptionally powerful, and one will be able to create ever more emanations. So the number of emanations one can emanate is dependent on the strength of one's calm abiding, and that the practitioner will progressively develop.
Temen lawe de inji miji temen rumda mawa de lo koya mare de nyan jue la na ya sia de desu gi ngushu nyumchu madu wa che nyan de an jolan ba da pa pa yong si gi de desu le ku re jina da ngan ju rumde ong de jine temen bala na desu gi nyan de lam na ran ye lam ji go re de jang yu sim be lam nyam le ji ya yo ro ba rumde ong de jine khon ju rumda gi ji de jang yu sim ba pa pa yo sang ji yo ba to ya yo ro ba jina de ne no kon ju le jang yu sim pa pa yo ba za Deju Moshi Papa Moshi Yubarwada on the Mato. That he said, Taman said, Yantu Lamna, Raja Lamla, Lobjanti, the Dumde on the Taman Shigomar, Yantu Lamla, Lobjanti, the Gendi, and then he gets something young Moshi Yumshuk, Matova, she near Topna, something new Moshi Matuba Yungur, as it. Taman said, Dumde on the Sheba, Taman said, Lam ji want to be temen Jotan Yong, Ni Galagos and Yandu Lamna, Rangi Lamla, Yamlin Ji to get Temen Saturwa, the intimate Jumta, Temen by Yungu Marwa, the so and some the young wishing Yumju Yamlin Machebache, and the Papa Yungres, and the sola and Peshing when she didn't matter by the one she do as it Peshimia Yumare. Just on Dumdi want to jib a Temen but Dum Dasatina. Yende lamna sugar yor, Ranja lamna yende, Janjusen by Yorwa. The Dinigo control Yana, Yomarella, and Digomata, control Janjusen by Yoba, Janjusen Papa Yungure, and there's all me something which you should top the Sars to Yobarwa. You're the ceremony, you touch it, that you touch it, you want to touch it. Niga Yunguru, Yoba Yunguru, Meba Yungurwa. Benedict, Jumde Baby, Yandi Casso, the 10 member, Jumde on the Jabal, Yoba, Meva Niga, depending on the Tassan Baden, Yoba, the Meva Niga Yungurwa. The Chachi Lam Yamlin in Jimmy, was you to be never Yomarwa. The Lam Gulekina Yungurmato.
To answer more fully about differentiating between Mahayana and Theravada, Theravada should be understood in two ways. There are the Tevadans in terms of path and Tevadans in terms of tenet. So those Tevadans in terms of path will be those of the hero or solitary realizer. They will be striving for their own individual liberation. And amongst the four tenets, they would be all four tenet holders will be found amongst those of Thevadan practitioners of the path, in other words, hero or solitary realizers. And amongst them, there will be those who have emanation, who have developed the capacity to have emanations, and there will be those who haven't bothered with that, who have decided not to do so. Then those who are considered Theravadan in terms of tenet, so these will refer to the lower two tenets of Abhashika and Sautrantika. Those tenets accept the hero path, the solitary realizer path, and the bodhisattva path. So a practitioner, a Theravadan practitioner by tenet, there will be those, certainly of the bodhisattva path, who will undoubtedly have developed the capacity to emanate. because they will have the bodhisattva motivation, but they will be a holder of Theravadan tenets. So they are the ones that will undoubtedly have the capacity, will have developed the capacity for emanations. Okay, thank you. Then we'll finish here for this morning. Thank you.